Well, hello, everybody, and welcome to 2026. And this week's weekly wrap, I'm joined by Anthony Flapper and Mirko Kagura. Anthony, how are you, my friend?
Very good, Luke. 2026. Going
Welcome
to be a
back.
great year, isn't it?
It will be a great year, mate. It started off with a lot of fun, so I dare say it's going to be a fun year. And Mirko, how are you going, buddy?
Yeah, terrific. It's like we're in the last week of 2025. I thought we'd sort of just ease into it, but there's been no easing of anything. It's just been game on, which is probably a reflection of what was happening during the, 10-ish or so days that we had to ourselves.
No, absolutely, absolutely. And you both enjoyed your breaks, I dare say?
Yeah, it was
Yeah.
fun. It was fun.
Yeah, no, always nice to get away and spend a bit of time with family. And thankfully, the weather did improve in that second week. That first week was pretty ordinary, particularly around Christmas Day. That was a bit cold.
Just means less drinking.
Yeah, no, true. Mirko, how about you give us a market update? We've had a bit of activity geopolitically, so it'd be interesting to see what's happened in the markets.
Well, it's interesting you mentioned the geopolitics, Luke, because as soon as a kidnapping of a leader or or a bombing of another country takes place, generally you'd think that markets would have a bit of a conniption on that front, but complete opposite, and probably shows how much logic has left the building, exited stage left on this, because what one would normally expect is a fair bit of sort of volatility, but it hasn't really been the case, and we've actually kicked off the year in the green. US is up about 1% for the week. The S&P 500, Nasdaq's up 1%. Our Warlords is having a green day today, heading into lunchtime, and we're up about zero point 0.4 for the week so far. So it's been positive news for the markets, if you like. I think the markets is. I did read somewhere, Luke, that the market is sort of in a markets not necessarily nervous. They're in thinking mode. They're trying to think their way through this. One of the things I did do over the break, as you do, is you're always doing a bit of reading and having a listen to what people are thinking about 2026 and everything. And I think the real consensus was that the volatility that we saw in 25, if that's not your cup of tea, really sorry, because you're going to have another cup of tea exactly the same in 2026. There'll be plenty of volatility and the like, and I'm not surprised. So I think the market is just trying to work its way through that, and it'll be very interesting times for us. Looking at it from an Australian perspective, we look at it and say, well, there's as much argument for rates going up as there is for going down at the moment, despite the inflation numbers coming out the other day. In the US, it seems to lay down the Zeta market to expect that rates will go down. So, and we're seeing strength in the Australian dollar as a result. So I think that we're going to hit the ground running, and we're certainly going to have to be on our toes for the next 12 months, without question, when it comes to markets and investments.
Look, but it is definitely an interesting landscape, and I agree with your sentiments there. Usually, typically, when there's a lot of instability from a geopolitical perspective, markets usually don't like that, and markets get very nervous. And it has been absolutely amazing to watch markets this week just sail through like nothing happened, nothing to see. Pretty simple from that end. Anthony, you've been around markets for a long time. Are you surprised as well?
Yeah, shocked. When I heard that the Venezuelan president was captured, I was sort of freaking out as to how busy Monday was going to be for the office, trying to correct things and take phone calls and confirm with clients that all is okay, and then nothing happens. It's bizarre.
Yeah. Look, it's a fascinating time, and it's either we're becoming more mature as investors and we're kind of going, well, okay, that's a political issue, not an economic issue. I don't need to worry. But the reality is all these things are intertwined, and you can only kick the can down the road so often without it rearing its ugly head. So look, it's definitely an interesting one. Now, something else in the market that popped up, and it's in the news only just the last couple of days. And there's talk of a mega merger between Rio Tinto and Glencore. So Rio Tinto is listed here on the Australian Stock Exchange, and Glencore is listed on the UK exchange. And if these two organisations came together, it would create the largest mining company in the world. And it would morph anything that we've seen from that point of view. Outside of the fact that they're only just starting to have discussions. But I guess the reason why I wanted to raise this, Mirko, back in 2007, if you remember, this was pre-GFC. So back in 2007, it was BHP and Glencore and Rio Tinto at that stage that was going to create this mega thing. And that all fell by the wayside, as if you remember. And I think at one stage there, the Rio share price hit $150. BHP share price was out of control. Glencore was out of control. And then it all went to Shizen pretty much 6 months later. What's your view about a merger of this nature? And is this 2007 all over again?
Yeah, look, I think this is probably a sign of what's been happening, not just in the resources sector, but sort of everywhere. Like in every sector, you think about the tech industry and the like, it seems to be a case of there's either a winner, there's a loser, and there is nothing in between. So having these massive companies come through is not a huge surprise, and I think we're going to see more in M&A activity in this space. I mean, this is all off the back of, I suppose, the demand for copper, which is at record prices. And I think I read somewhere that between the two companies, if this merger was to come off, they would be responsible for 7% of the copper, basically sales that take place globally, which is a huge number when you think about it. And good luck trying to control the way that these companies can then behave when it comes to prices and the like. I can't even get my servo to explain to me why the petrol price is 50 cents higher than a kilometre down the road, let alone when you own 7% of the copper assets around the globe.
Yeah, no, look, it's an extraordinary concept. And I guess I always go back to that period of 2007 where it was crazy. Like all of a sudden there were mergers, there were acquisitions, there were all kinds of things being discussed. And then all of a sudden liquidity has disappeared out of the market. And I'm not suggesting that liquidity is going to disappear out of the market, but with so many things going on, and part of and I guess we'll talk a bit more about Venezuela and the Trump administration shortly, but this pursuit of wanting to control markets and control assets and resources is really the new game in town, in truth. And the companies that are in this position or in this prominent position, they're going to do really, really well, particularly as we have this geopolitical uncertainty and this transition to new technologies, i.e. your lithiums, your coppers and the likes from that point of view. So it's definitely going to be an interesting space, that's for sure. Another question or another thing that I'd like to raise is the concept of hybrid work. And it's been around, obviously, when COVID first happened and all that kind of stuff, we all transitioned to a hybrid work arrangement. We were all working from home. And then invariably, as COVID's disappeared and whatever, some people have gone back full-time, other people have come back intermittently, and some people haven't gone back at all. And what we're seeing is that this hybrid notion is here to stay. It's not something that's going to disappear anytime soon. But we have noticed that with it being here to stay, corporates are having to do, having to toe a very fine line in terms of what they are doing. So what they're looking at doing is changing their locations, moving to more premium areas, fixing their offices, making it more balanced, making it more lifestyle driven from that point of view. Gentlemen, you've been around long enough. You've both been veterans of many years of work and all that kind of stuff. I guess the question that I'm asking is, from a hybrid perspective, do you see it as a positive? Do you see it as a negative? What are your thoughts around what corporates are doing, and what do you think the longer term trajectory looks like, not only for Australia but at a global perspective?
Well, being the eldest veteran on the screen, as you've called us, we're veterans, and I am the eldest veteran on the screen, I'm going to introduce a new concept in 2026 called the concept of work. How about people just work, right? I don't care where you do it, how you do it, whether you've got a shovel in your hand or you're pushing a pen or you're behind a keyboard. How about people just do their work? Look, I think we know that globally we have a problem with productivity, yeah? And it's not just as simple as sort of putting a number against it, 3 days in the office, 4 days, 2 days. It's actually quite an issue that we have about getting things done. And, we see it a real microcosm of that, through our own dealings that we do through our own office, and how difficult it is to actually get things done administratively, through, bureaucratic issues and red tape and all that sort of stuff. That's a major issue. And I think that what we're seeing is now people are having to attract the best talent. You're having to offer that sort of flexibility. You're having to offer, the SHMIC offices that you talk about, and the, end of trip facilities and all that sort of stuff. And which is a good thing. At the end of the day, we do spend more time, working than we do doing other stuff in our lives. So yeah, it has to be, there has to be some sense of enjoyment. But I still think that the focus should be on how do we get the productivity solution resolved so that we can give everybody the flexibility and the lifestyle and all that sort of stuff without sending us down a situation where you basically force a recessionary outcome because nothing's getting done. You're sitting there and you just can't get a thing done. So I think that the ramifications for big office buildings and the like, there'll be some long-term scenarios there. How many cranes will we have up in the skyline, across the global cities of the world in the future? I don't know.
That's a fair point. What about your views, Anne?
Yeah, look, I think if you think about it from a pre-COVID position, employers were all about flexibility of work, and that was generally here's your office hours, generally 9 to 5, but if you need to leave the office to do an appointment early and you make the time up later, all well and good. And even back before COVID even hit, we had a number of staff looking at doing sort of 1 day a week from home, mainly as a time to avoid interruptions, catch up on things, uninterrupted time where stuff was getting done. So we never really had a productivity issue in that regard, because it was more trying to give them some peace to effectively push through their work. Enter COVID, and everyone's working from home, and it seems to have been that across the board, and it depends on the industry that you're working in, is that the productivity has got less and less, which is now an issue for the state and the country and globally. And effectively, this hybrid model is sort of now the norm. So I think there's got to be an argument to say, well, yeah, you can have flexible workplace and you can have hybrid working arrangements, but isn't it the onus then back on the employer to say, well, here's what you're paid to do from in your role, this is your requirements, this is the desired outputs. Whether you do that in 30 hours or 50 hours is up to you. How hard do you want to work? We tend to not be holding staff to account, and hence we're in the predicament that we've got. So if everyone was paid on output, wouldn't we have a much different productivity outcome?
Yeah, that's an interesting way to look at it, actually, in the sense that, if things are paid on output rather than just on presence. And I think, that's definitely a change. Look, I think for mine, I think the hybrid model, as we see it, has to change. And the hybrid model is a good thing for a couple of reasons. One, the cost of living and the way people live today, like mums and dads in the old days when I was growing up, for example, and whatever, it was still possible that mum might have stayed home and dad went to work. So it was possible to still be in a single income family where the income would be sufficient to support the family from that point of view. In today's environment, given house prices, given cost of living and all that kind of stuff, it's next to nigh impossible. So anyone who's trying to raise a family and work at the same time is difficult. So affording them with flexibility, I think is relevant. I think two parts to it. I think your view on the output, I think that changes the way employment arrangements work, because if you're being measured on that rather than presence, then that's a different calculation. So that's the first issue. And I think the second issue that we've really got to think about in terms of, with families and all that kind of stuff, and with the way they're going about their things from an employer perspective, is I think that this probably needs to be greater transparency between employers and employees to go, well, okay, how does this work? What does it look like? What are the expectations and so on? So one thing we don't want to ever get back to is that control and command approach. Because I think, 10 years ago, 20 years ago, it was very much a control and command, from a work perspective and all that kind of stuff. And management now has evolved where it's very much about not micromanaging. It's about trusting. It's about letting people be the best versions of themselves and doing what they need to do. I think that's a good thing. I'd hate to think we're going back to, and that's where the output thing is an interesting one. In saying that, corporates, I'm intrigued by what they're doing at the moment, because if you look at the CBD at the moment in Melbourne, the newer buildings and all that kind of stuff in good locations and whatever, they're being fully rented out, whereas the older buildings, for example, which haven't kept up with the amenities and so on, they're now empty. So what that essentially means is that challenges the valuation models of these buildings. So that's going to be a real challenge for, the big property groups, for example, that have all these property assets that are listed on the exchanges and so on, where you're kind of going, well, what's it really worth? And if you look at somebody like a CBUS, the super fund, where a lot of their assets sit in that sort of space, where you're kind of going, well, what are the values of these things and are they true? So that's going to be a challenge. What's your view there, Nick? Do you think that's probably a concern we should think about?
Well, I was just quickly digging up some stats on office vacancies in the sort of mid-2025, mid last year. Melbourne was the worst of the worst, and office vacancies were 17% CBD.
Yeah.
Yeah, 17% of the joint is empty, and it shows in the city. Walk down there. Today's probably not a good example. It's 40 odd degrees, but there's like tumbleweeds. And how many places? Not just the offices, the ramifications on offices, retail, all the rest of it. That becomes a massive issue, and it's actually a very complex one, because, as we know, rental rates are very high. Can they be maintained? And at some point in time, and we're seeing it now, restaurants aren't opening on weekends. They're like, it's not worth my while opening on a Sunday. Places are not opening early in the morning because there's nobody there. It's very, very difficult to predict where that goes. And I know that they talk about repurposing of buildings and sort of saying, well, perhaps this is a solution to our residential issues and a lack of housing. Good luck repurposing commercial buildings, right? If you know anything about the building industry and the way that commercial buildings are built, it's not simple to just turn that into 4 apartments on each level. It doesn't work that way. But people seem to think that we can do all this. So there would be some big institutional investors, and there's been some serious transactions taken place in that insto space, in the REIT space, where transactions have been done at some valuations where people have gone, geez, that's an interesting valuation given what they paid for the building 5 years ago. So I think we're going to see a lot more of that activity for sure.
Fair point. Now, Anthony, I believe yesterday you attended a seminar or a webinar from the ATO. So you got to sit down with the guys you love the most from that point of view, and you got to listen to them firsthand. What were some of the concerns or some of the issues that they were raising or discussing?
Yeah, well, it's from a training provider, Luke, but ATO there's been a lot of press in recent weeks around a number of target areas that they're looking at into the future. And a number of those we've spoken about before, trust distributions, family trust elections, etc., etc. But the one that I hadn't heard much about previously is in regard to holiday homes. Now, there's a part of the legislation, which is Section 2650, which talks about leisure facilities. Now, I've never seen this, and I would probably say that most clients would never have come across this, and probably a number of tax agents. What they're referencing is that where a home or a holiday house is, its main purpose is a holiday house for the family, but has portions of the year that are rented, it becomes, or there is the ability for the ATO to deny deductions if its predominant use is as a holiday home. So if you think about it as an example, you've got somebody that's got a holiday home down on the peninsula. They go down there probably 6 to 8 times a year. They put it on Airbnb or stays for the rest of it at a significant rate because a lot of the on costs are pretty high. They rent it for 3 or 4 times for the year, which is generally over the Christmas break where the rates are high and doesn't get used for the rest of it. There is an argument to say that those holding costs, so if you think about interest on their mortgage, council rates, water rates, etc., could all be denied if the main purpose of that holiday house is for the use of the family, etc., and that its main purpose is accessible income. So it's a different take on probably what most accountants, tax agents have thought about for a long time. They've flagged that they're going to have a look at this from 1 July 2026. So it's more of a warning. Current arrangements, they're not going to spend resources on looking at. I'm not convinced of that. If it looks like it's not, or it looks like there's deductions way above the income levels, I'm sure the ATO will continue to look at them. So, yeah, for anyone else or anyone that's got that sort of arrangement where the income levels, there is accessible income, but the predominant use is as a holiday home, yeah, it's a case of be warned. And, we need to have a think about how you structure those arrangements.
Just thinking about that out aloud, Anthony, isn't there a risk that this becomes a judgment? Like, isn't this one person's judgment versus someone else's? Like, think about this. Let's say someone says, but our intention is to rent out the property, and we put it out for rent every day of the year. And the reality is the property might be only used for 50 days of the year for that purpose, and the other 315 days it's available. So how difficult is it to measure the intent is the question that I would ask.
So I think some of the things that they will start to look at is at what rate is that home being rented for or advertised for? How does it compare to others in the market? So if you've got a place that's should be fetching $800 or market rate says $800 a week, and you're charging $2,000 on Airbnb, so you're unrealistic and not going to get that price, they would say, well, that's not a fair attempt at trying to generate income. So. Okay. They will look at things like that. Then I think it'll also come back to what's the level of income. So if you're only renting it for 3 weeks over the Christmas break and effectively the rest of the time it's available but never rented, they're going to say, well, hang on, are you really making an attempt to rent this?
Okay. All right. So the question there is, it comes down to not only just the intent, but having the proof behind to justify what you're doing.
Most things in tax are a question of fact.
Yeah. No, I get it. Look, they're taking all the fun out of this, Ant, I'm telling you.
The only guy that can get excited by Section 2650 of the income tax assessment. I love it.
Well, you know what's happened. Land tax has gone through the roof. The state taxes are going up. So the deductions in the tax returns are much bigger than they've ever been before.
Yeah.
So the ATO is going, no, we can't lose there.
Well, this is the Daniel Andrews present to the federal government. So all credit to him.
The gift that keeps on giving.
Absolutely. Now, it would be remiss of us not to speak of what's going on in the United States at this moment in time. So on the weekend, we saw the United States do something which I thought I would never see in my lifetime, as in go into a foreign country, pretty much attack the capital, steal the president, and bring that president of that foreign country to America to face trial. Now, as to whether or not the president has done something illegal or wrong or whatever from that point of view, that's for the courts to determine. We're not here to determine that. But the fact that they went into a foreign country in breach of all conventions and in breach of all international laws from that point of view, that's got to be a game changer with the way geopolitics works moving forward, surely.
It would be remiss of us not to mention it. It would probably be smart for us to not talk about this. But anyway, here you go. You couldn't make this stuff up if you tried. Honestly, you couldn't. Like, if someone told me that this is how things play out moving forward, I'd be like, yeah, no, I don't think so. But we're certainly living in it. Nothing surprises me anymore. And the cynic in me and the people that seem to think they understand what's going on here is that there's a lot more to do with war is being the best business going around than the reasons being put forward as to why these things are occurring. You don't need to be a rocket scientist to understand Venezuela's oil reserves are bigger, I believe, than Saudi Arabia's are, and no surprise, all of a sudden we're talking about 50 million barrels of oil being sold to the US. US saying that we'll determine what happens with that money when it hits. Fantastic, and now we're. The latest one is now we're throwing Greenland into the mix because surprise, surprise, they're the best resource critical minerals place. So, no surprises anymore. And unfortunately, money and commercial scenarios seem to drive all these decisions.
True.
Yeah, you think when I first heard this, I thought, oh, what was that movie that person was watching last night? Big, interesting show. And then it was reality. So, there's been movie writers talking about this stuff and putting it in movies for years and years. Now it's we've got our own reality show.
Yeah, I think there was a movie called Wag the Tail or something of that nature. Anyway, where there was a president in the United States who was having an issue against him, and in order to confuse the public, they've gone and attacked another nation from that point of view in order to get that off the front page news. And it's like watching this live, yeah. And a couple of things. I think I've been trying to think about the Venezuelan thing and trying to understand what on earth is going on here. And I actually think there is some logic behind the madness. The reality is China was receiving discounted oil or discounted resources from the likes of Iran and from the likes of Venezuela. So that was the benefit of all this stuff. So, and despite all the sanctions and all that kind of stuff that was working, China was the beneficiary of that, which was meaning that America's attacks on China were proving futile. We've gone and bombed Iran, and now we've gone and stolen the Venezuelan president. So if you want to upset China, this is a good way to do it without directly attacking China. So I think there's a geopolitical edge to all this stuff. So I can see what they were trying to, I'm not saying it justifies what they've done, but I can see that. The Greenland one's interesting because Donald Trump doesn't need to invade Greenland at all. Donald Trump actually has access to everything he wants to do from a security perspective right now under the NATO convention. He can build bases, he can drop whatever he needs to do from that point of view, he can do if he wants to. This seems to be a snatch and grab on resources. This is nothing more, nothing less. And it's just, I must admit, I'm just sitting here, I'm wondering about, like, if you're China at the moment, you're sitting there going, okay, if he can do that to Venezuela, why can't we do this to Taiwan? I'm looking at Putin now in Russia going, bye-bye Ukraine, bye-bye Georgia, bye-bye whoever else, bye-bye Poland for that matter. In the US, you're kind of going, well, is this Colombia, then Mexico next? Where does this all go? And then what does this all do from, that 80 years of peace that we had on the back of NATO after World War II, and the alliances that were forged, and that, it was an ironclad alliance on the Western world. Trump doing this to Greenland, that's going to break this thing, surely.
Well, let's hope they forget about this little old island called Australia. Leave us alone. But while you're at it, if you want to throw into the mix, the US also seized a Russian oil tanker as well, to reclaim Russia, just in case you wanted to throw it. So, Putin might be thinking about where one of his ships are going as well.
Look, one thing I will say, Mirko, too, if you think about Venezuelan oil now coming into the US, obviously not paying for it, got to have a great deflationary impact in terms of their costs from that point of view. So that could actually drive their interest rates even lower from that perspective. So it's definitely, look, it's a fascinating place to be, and it's what a wonderful time to be alive in terms of what happens next. You feel like you just bought a full box of popcorn and yet the movie's just chewing away going, this is cool.
And can I remind everyone, it is the 9th of January.
Absolutely. Now, back home on lighter matters, we've actually seen Albo finally relent and decide to have a Royal Commission on the back of the Bondi terrorist event, which I guess the question that I'm asking myself here is, why has it taken so long? Why would you go and get so many bullets shot at you, excuse the pun, from an Albo perspective, to then eventually yield and go, okay, we'll have a Royal Commission? It just seems silly. Do you think he played that badly?
Played it badly, yeah, but he was probably trying to hope it disappeared, I suspect.
When you have 15 people get killed, it's pretty hard to have something disappear, I would have thought.
He thinks he's Teflon, so.
Yeah, okay. Well, he's clearly stupid, because it was never going to be a win strategy. And in good news, we've had Jacinta Allen, thankfully. She's come back to work today on the back of the heat wave here in Victoria. I think she wanted to avoid the I'm not holding a hose, mate theory. So she obviously wanted to be in charge. Thankfully, it doesn't look like we've got to the catastrophic events, at least here in metropolitan Melbourne. I'm not sure about regional Victoria, but in metropolitan Melbourne, we haven't got the cracking winds. They were talking about winds of being 90 to 110 kilometres an hour, and we haven't seen those just yet.
I think we see that this afternoon. It's not going to be flash. Yeah, it's
so it's
those areas that are. I heard someone from the CFA this morning, and he was actually saying, he goes, we have no control over some of these outbreaks now.
Yeah.
We're sort of in the lap of nature now.
All right, for all our clients who are out there, and we do have a lot of clients in regional Victoria, our hearts go out to you. Please stay safe, and if you're in any sort of danger or in any sort of place where you could be in danger and there is an opportunity to leave, get out of there. Don't hang around. There's no heroes created out of this sort of stuff. So, the thing you've got to do is just protect yourselves, most importantly, and hopefully people have heeded the warnings, which would be cool. And I think the final thing here in Victoria, which has been interesting this week, we saw Sam Groth, who was a deputy leader of the Victorian Liberal Party, who's decided to resign because he's been white-anted and destroyed by his own colleagues, and he's had enough. So 3 years into his political career, he's decided to call time. And he was considered to be probably a future leader of the Liberal Party here in Victoria, which is, you just kind of look at the Victorian Liberal Party and think, geez, you just have to shut up and just be nice to each other, and you probably win the next election. And they just can't seem to do that.
Just when they were starting to get a little bit of traction with Jess Wilson, bang, yep. Sledgehammer, they find a way to knife themselves. So, look, we've always said it, regardless of what side of politics you sit on, you need to have a fully functioning, fit-for-purpose opposition. Can't say that I can see that both at federal and state level, unfortunately.
Yeah, no, can't disagree with it.
And his timing is interesting, just before the Australian Open, so maybe he just wanted to get along to that without any accusations of too many perks.
Yeah, no, fair point, mate. Fair point. All right, gentlemen, it's 2026, new year, a lot of excitement already. We're 9 days in, for God's sake, and and there's been a lot going on. What are the hopes and aspirations for this year? Are you thinking this year is going to be a good year?
For sure. Yeah, it's been a good start. Interesting times. We're just firing off the back of 2025, which was fantastic for us, for our clients, and looking forward to what the next 12 months brings. Absolutely.
What about you, Mickey?
I think you've always got to look forward to the to a new year and have a positive outlook on it, and whatever comes our way, we will be ready to go and ready to deal with it. And I'm so much looking forward to see what the 12 months holds. And 9th of January 2027, let's review what happened, eh?
Yeah, no, absolutely. Look, and for mine as well, I'm also optimistic about what the year is. There's some serious challenges out there geopolitically. I think there's some issues that need to be resolved and will get resolved over time. Economically, I'm fascinated to see how the AI revolution takes place and what happens there. And I think from a broader society point of view, not to leverage too much of something that Albo has said in the past, but a bit more kindness out there in society and broader society wouldn't go astray. I do think at times things become two-headed, and I do think in the discourse, particularly on the social media scheme, I think some things get said and put forward that just shouldn't be out there in the public domain. And I think, a bit of kindness and a bit of respect from that point of view would do the world a wonderful thing, I think, from that point of view. Thinking about the weekend, boys, anything exciting planned, Anthony? Are you playing bowls this weekend? What's up?
Yeah, I was meant to be there today in Ballarat, but extreme heat has forced us to cancel today, commence tomorrow.
Oh, nice. And what about you, Mickey? You're out there in the garden, I dare say.
Hopefully trying to save my garden with all the heat that we've had. So I gave it a good old water last night. I don't know how much it's going to help, but there'll be a bit of a mess to clean up, no doubt.
Yeah, no doubt. And we need to be careful here in Victoria too, because we're on we're heading towards water restrictions, it looks like, given that we've had a very dry winter and summer, and a desalination plant that is as useful as not much.
I was watering the front garden yesterday, watching the Colorbond roof, doing that commercial going, oh, how good's the Colorbond roof?
Magnificent. Well, gentlemen, thank you so much for joining me on this first run of Weekly Wrap for 2026. Here's to 2026 being a great year to all our wonderful clients. As always, stay well, take care, and if you're in the fire zones, please be safe. To our team, as always, thank you for your great work. Keep it up, and we'll see you all next week. Take care, guys.
Hey, guys.